you realize that this is not going to go unchallenged.
Gambling has become a very easy habit to fall into in today's modern world. And as there's a lot of examples of gambling in the Looney Tunes franchise, it's my honor to host the author of the upcoming book, Assist: How to Help a Loved One with a Gambling Problem Without Losing Yourself, to warn of the dangers that we face in our daily lives and how they can affect others.
So, of course, you realize this means podcast.
Are you ready, eager young space cadet?
Meep, meep. I saw a pussy.
That is the limit.
Where's the kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
It is my pleasure to have on the show a lawyer and an ambassador for responsible gambling, Anita Ondine Smith. Hi, Anita. How are you?
Lovely to see you. Thanks for inviting me on. I love your show. Such an unusual take.
It's a little out there, but it is related to the fandom as a whole. And there's a lot of kids who are watching these cartoons that are, being inundated with visuals of gambling. And now that there's gambling apps everywhere on their phone and mobile devices, I feel like it's important to talk about, especially to, maybe the parents of these kids who are listening or the kids themselves who want to just explore the possibilities. And I love that your book is talking about the dangers of that.
What's interesting is when I was growing up, I watched a lot of Looney Tunes cartoons. And of course, at that time, I was seeing them through the eyes of a child. Now I have children of my own and I occasionally see them watching. Obviously, there's a lot more diversity in cartoons available today. So it'll be every now and then one will pop up. And I am sort of mystified at how hilarious some of these topics are and how they tackle them and how, the absurdity and hilarity of them. So when you invited me to come onto your show, I'm like, absolutely, I am there. I find this so fascinating.
Well, thank you very much. And yes, there is a lot to watch for kids today. And it doesn't always play into what the modern world is like. It's usually like a fantasy version of what kids can expect. And, the harsh reality of things is something that parents have to tackle as the kid gets older. Having a kid myself, I come across this as, this is a good teaching moment whenever, something is presented in that way. We're getting ahead of that because your book, Assist, talks about your personal relationship and how you were able to deal with the harsh realities of gambling with a significant other in your life and not run from it, but tackle it head on. And that's something that I think is commendable and something that we all can look at to as an example of what to do. And you go through your book really well as far as the integration of your personal struggle, the breaking down of terminology that people may come across through gambling addiction, key takeaways at the end of every chapter, what you can do today, like a checklist of everything, and then journaling prompts, like somebody who's, actively going through it and like what they can write down and do on a daily basis. I think that is a really remarkable effort that you've put into breaking down the situation that you went through and a way to help others. And I think that's just a wonderful, wonderful thing to then put into a book like this.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate your kind words. It was a labor of love, and so much of what our family went through that experience of my husband, Randy, having a gambling addiction, it was so hard. The times were tough. They were bleak. Occasionally, it was hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But having gotten through it and being on the other side, I looked back and said, there's so many lessons that I learned. If I ever encounter another person in my shoes, I just want to tell them everything.
Yeah.
Just to help them and shortcut their process to get from where they started to, through the other end. Because, there was a lot of trial and error. When I was going through that, I went on Amazon immediately to try and find, what books are available to help spouses, parents, people close to the person who's gambling. And I found nothing at that time.
Wow.
And as a result of that, I literally was doing research, reading research papers, taking notes, reading everything I could get my hands on. And I had amassed this huge amount of research and notes. And I was literally kind of testing them on ourselves. It was like, our family was the petri dish for a minute while I did trial and error and experimented and saw if this worked or that worked and this didn't and that didn't. And I just wanted to share what I learned because I didn't want other people to have to go through all of that. I tried my best to distill all of that research and all of that learning into as clear and compassionate set of steps, guidelines, scripts to really help the person in those shoes get through that moment.
I saw that. I heard that as I was reading your words, and it came through as I'm going to lead by example. And the way that everything kind of comes together and you're able to, showcase the dangers of this from start to finish, I think is a really commendable piece of work. And yeah, kudos to you going through it. I mean, I bet that was a really difficult time in your life.
It certainly was, but I'm glad we're at the other side now and helping others.
And I hope this helps listeners. I hope this helps, friends of listeners. If you know anyone that has a gambling problem or you can see the signs, definitely share this with them. Now, relating this to Looney Tunes, I think is, a really fun idea and concept. And so I wanted to showcase a couple examples that lead into certain topics that you talk about with gambling addiction. Now, in Barbary Coast Bunny, the 1956 short, parodies the idea of how a gambler can outsmart the system and how Bugs Bunny's impossible winning streak is just an aggravating tool that allows the villain in that to exemplify this harmful ideology of I can beat him when you can't. It's like trying to go into a casino and being like, I can beat the house. Here's how I'm going to do it. And then you go in there and then you're just, in debt. How is the idea of outsmarting the system something that happens to real gamblers in casinos? And what are some signs that they can look out for?
It's a great point you touch on, Jonathan. This idea of being able to outsmart the system is one of the mindsets that you see among problem gamblers. It's not the only mindset, but it is one of those dominant mindsets that drive people from, starting out gambling as purely a form of entertainment. And if they get that one idea stuck in their brain that they can outsmart the system, it drives this continual increasingly irrational behavior that they eventually find difficult to stop. And, there are other reasons why people gamble, but this is one of the main ones. And I think it's a very curious psychology. It's like the person who is gambling thinks they've figured out some kind of secret formula or, some magic, some divine, yes, I have the potion, which, if you took a step back and reflected on it, is clearly irrational. Yes. And however, if you're in that moment and you really believe that, then it can be an incredible driver and compulsion to continue gambling, because if that is your core belief, that you can outsmart the system, then you will do anything to prove yourself right, to prove that that identity is correct, that that is you. You are the person who can outsmart the system. What I find curious looking at Bugs Bunny is he doesn't seem to have that mindset to me. I mean, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I don't think Bugs Bunny comes across as thinking he can outsmart the system. I feel like Bugs Bunny has the divine luck that certain characters in Looney Tunes always have. You know, there are some characters that always get out of trouble. And when watching these examples, I view it through that lens. I'm thinking, well, of course, Bugs Bunny always gets out of, you know, a jam.
Well, he does have those.
Of course.
Yeah, he does have those
ahead.
2 lucky rabbits' feet.
Well, indeed.
They're intact. But yeah, the villains in these are the ones that exemplify the damning behavior. Chasing loss is something that in this short in particular, Barbara Rico's bunny, Nasty Canasta, is chasing. Like he's constantly losing, but he's constantly trying to cheat the system in a way that Bugs Bunny will lose, and then he will steal all of the gold and all the money away from him. And of course, Bugs Bunny retaliates with winning.
I got a full house. What you got, sucker?
Gee, does that beat me? All I got is 2 pair. A pair of ones and another pair of ones. Hey, do you mean I win again?
And it ending in a game of a animated version of Russian roulette.
Yeah, you win. But now we're going to play another little game.
Another game? Hey, that's great. What do? Spin this little gadget?
But I love Bugs' line in this because he says, you realize that this is not going to go unchallenged. And that line stuck out to me because it felt like you were thinking the same thing. In your situation, you were looking at this problem of, I have a gambler in my life who's addicted to it. And it would, be so easy to not challenge this and to remove yourself from the equation, but you decided to challenge it. And I feel like that was a motivating factor for not only your mental state at that time, because you were going at it with love. You were wanting to save this person, but the way that you went about it, and then it led to this wonderful book and helping others. It did not go unchallenged. I love that line from Bugs, and I felt like that related to your story as well.
I really appreciate you picking up on that. Jonathan, I'm going to confess to you that there was a time when I was very early in figuring out that Randy had a gambling addiction. And when I say figuring it out, it's very common among people with any form of addiction to try and hide it. It's probably easier to hide a gambling addiction than most addictions because, if you are drinking alcohol excessively, there's typically some obvious signs. Yes. You might smell like alcohol or be passed out, or there's empty bottles around.
Yep.
But gambling addiction and people who are experiencing that have a range of strategies to hide it. And, that is connected to a range of things like the shame, stigma of having a gambling problem. So they will go to great lengths not to let people around them know that they have a problem, which is what Randy did when I met him. I had no idea. He never told me anything about this challenge that he had. And I was slowly figuring it out. And once I fully grasped that he did have this problem, I did for a moment think, I'm out of here.
Mm.
Like, I'm just going to leave. I can't deal with this. I don't know how to deal with this. Where's the next train to Georgia? You know, I wanted to get out of there. So the instinct to challenge it was not immediate. But I did come to that view because I sat back, you know, I really genuinely planned to leave. I had called up the moving company, booked a truck to come and collect my belongings.
Sure.
But because that was a few weeks ahead in advance, I had these couple of weeks to stew on it and think it over. And, you know, I'm mulling over in my head sort of 24/7, like, what's going on? How did I get here? What's Randy doing? And it was during those days, that period of time, that something clicked. And I thought to myself, this is so weird that somebody who is an extremely successful person, an extremely high functioning person. For people who don't know, my husband, Randy Livingston, is a 10 plus year veteran of the NBA. When he was in his junior and senior year at high school, he was the number 1 ranked player in the country.
Wow.
This is a guy who has a relentless work ethic, who is incredibly dedicated to his craft and to being the best and being, you know, number 1. And it just didn't compute. I couldn't figure out how somebody could have a problem for so long and none of the people in his immediate circle stuck up their hand and challenged him. And, you know, maybe some did, but they just didn't do it assertively enough.
They did do it in a way that confronted the problem head on. I think that's what it comes to.
Yes, indeed. So I thought to myself, I could leave right now and get myself out of this situation because I don't want to deal with it. And I knew in my mind, my boundary was I don't want to be in partnership with a person who has a gambling addiction. I knew that. I know that today. I knew it at the time. So my thought process was, if over 25 years, and here's somebody that's been in contact with a lot of, again, like a very elite kind of circle, very high functioning people who's on NBA teams that have exceptionally good coaches, exceptionally good, you know, health services.
And trainers.
You would think, trainers. Yeah, you would think that somebody somewhere along the line would have been able to help him. And I thought, wow, you know, why has this persisted? Why has he never managed to get the help he needs? And as I was thinking that, I thought to myself, you know what? If I walk out the door, nobody will help him. If he hasn't got it through elite high school, through elite college, you know, he played at LSU, Louisiana State University in the SEC, you know, they're one of the top conferences in the country and had the best of the best. He was drafted by the Houston Rockets. You know, they have the best of the best. He was actually on the team with 3 Hall of Fame players in his rookie year, Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Clyde Drexler. I mean,
incredible.
He was among elite people. Nobody helped him. And I thought, if that has been his experience, then maybe I'm being called to do this. Like, maybe I am the one that needs to dig in, do some research, try and figure out if I can have that information, knowledge, tools to do that challenge that you described, to challenge the action.
Absolutely.
And I certainly didn't at the beginning. I promise you, I was ill-equipped at the beginning, and I had to figure it out. I had to work it out. It is not something that is easy.
I can imagine. Yeah, but you definitely went through the planning stage. You got your resources together. You did research. You read books. You read, you know, as much as there was on the topic. And then, yeah, you came at it head on, and I think it's commendable. I thank you for going down Randy's life like that. I was going to mention to the listeners who we were talking about, which is Randy Livingston. As a Houston native, I'm pretty sure I got to see him play a couple of times because I frequented the stadium that the Rockets played at. But yeah,
wow, that's amazing. Lucky you.
Lucky me. But yeah, this is and also, being a Looney Tunes fan, we're also NBA fans. So shout out to the NBA players that also appeared in Space Jam. That's really cool. But
yeah, very cool.
Yeah, so I commend you on, seeing that there needed to be somebody that needed to step forward for this and for taking that head on. Were there any challenges in that time that you felt were maybe two questions. Were there any challenges that felt too out of your realm and you needed to seek someone outside of your circle to come in, or like a third party voice? Or do you feel like you needed to be more intimate and it needed to be just the two of you? That's my first question. And then I have a second question after that.
Yes, well, great question. I think if I had the guts to reach out to somebody and bring them in, I would have.
Okay.
But I actually didn't. I wasn't brave enough to do that. I still felt the stigma and the shame of being in that situation.
Got it.
Because, there's all these things going through your head. Like, we've failed.
Sure.
How could we fail like this? In addition to Randy being a high-functioning, highly successful person, I also am a highly successful person. So having, being involved with something that from the outside world felt to me like a failure at the time, although now feels like a tremendous success because we got through it. When I was in that situation and I was living that life day to day, I wanted to talk to somebody about it, but I just couldn't bring myself to, and I feel looking back that, I really ought to have done that. But, that's the reason why I turned to search for books, because books are kind of a safe haven where you can gather information with nobody else knowing about it.
Sure. We're podcasts now. Podcasts are that for the modern generation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Podcasts are fantastic for that.
That's what we're doing
Absolutely
right now.
agree. Happy to be here.
Thank you. No, well, I would say you were incredibly brave to tackle this head on by yourself. I mean, like, that's even more brave than bringing in outside sources. My other question was, you mentioned he was a successful NBA player and had this career. Do you think the gambling addiction started when he was younger, or do you think he had that gradually come about in his personality later on? That was my other question regarding his situation.
Yes. So I think I see it as a 3-stage process. And really, honestly, this is really Randy's story to tell.
Oh, sure.
But nevertheless, bless his heart, he has given me permission to talk about it. So I appreciate his good grace of allowing me to speak in detail about his personal story. He also speaks very well and very passionately and in great detail about his own story in various venues.
He wrote a very lovely foreword to the book as well.
He did. Yes. And he's been incredibly supportive of me doing this book and writing about it and sharing our family's journey. So I have so much gratitude to him, because if he had not said, yes, Anita, go for it, I wouldn't have done it. There's too much personal stories and personal experience in the book to have done it without his blessing. So I'm incredibly grateful to him for seeing the value in sharing this story with others. So with that preface, I will share a bit more about his story. So I I look at his journey into addiction kind of in 3 stages. The early stage was normalization of gambling during childhood. And I've used some very kind of broad general terms there because I want the parents listening to this to relate it to what's going on today. We are seeing an increasing normalization of exposure to gambling today. Gambling products, gambling activity, gambling advertising. It is becoming more prevalent and visible and normalized. So I think I'm just going to park that there so that parents can ponder what that might be doing in terms of sowing seeds at a young age.
No, absolutely.
So Randy grew up in New Orleans in a culture where it was completely normal at family gatherings for people at the gathering to be playing cards, to be betting, and that was literally just part of the course, part of the culture, and a totally normal thing to do. I don't think anybody for a single second thought twice about whether or not there was any potential downside to this in terms of children seeing it, children being involved, children being taught to play. And although that is not as common perhaps today, you're seeing an analogous situation today with online gambling,
mobile games. They're
mobile
everywhere.
games,
Yep.
and also gambling-like behaviors, which might not be gambling, but kids are getting exposed to loot boxes and skins betting and all of this kind of betting-like behavior that's kind of telling them that this is normal activity. Anyway, so that I would say was stage 1. He had early exposure to gambling. Then he had this incredible rapid rise through his teenage years, where he was just relentless in his pursuit of perfection on the basketball court and rose, as I said, to be the number 1 player in the United States. He was at that time predicted to be the next superstar. Primetime Live did a segment specifically on him. He was, in Sports Illustrated. He was, you name it. There were articles all around saying, Randy Livingston is the next big thing. So you could imagine from that position, then experiencing not 1, but 2 major injuries, like very catastrophic injuries in fairly close succession. One was between high school and college. So he had to redshirt going into college to recover from that first knee injury. Then he played for a while, got another knee injury, which almost took him out again. They were both almost career-ending injuries, but he persisted. He's just so incredibly, stubbornly determined to play in the NBA.
Very tenacious too.
Incredibly tenacious. And I think it's hard for us mere mortals to comprehend the mental blow that must have been, because it wasn't just I'm the best at this and I've put in all this work and I've achieved, this initial success. It had such an incredibly deeper meaning. He grew up in a lower socioeconomic circumstance, and his success on the basketball court meant getting out of that. It meant changing his life and the life of his family, changing their fortunes for the better. So it was more than just sporting prowess. It was, I'm going to change my life and the life of my loved ones around me for the better through what I'm able to do on the basketball court. And to have that taken away, so unexpectedly, so suddenly, so harshly, I think was kind of the stage 2 of his descent into gambling addiction.
Yeah.
And if you ask him when he felt like he really was starting to get a true addiction where he couldn't stop, it was during that time at LSU when he was rehabbing his injuries. And he still had, of course, like most athletes, an incredible competitive drive. So he wanted to compete. He wanted to be out there, but he couldn't. He was hobbling around on crutches, doing rehab. And the riverboats on the Mississippi River have, boat casinos.
Yeah, yeah.
So they would, there was a boat casino in Baton Rouge where he was, and he would sneak down there because he was not of age. He was not 21 yet when he was doing this, risking so much because it would have been a scandal because of who he was. He would have lost his scholarship. He would have, there would have been so much negative attention, not only on him, but on the program, which if you imagine, Shaquille O'Neal had come through LSU just a few years prior to him. So, the program was very, very highly regarded. To bring the shame onto that program would have been, quite devastating. So the risks he was taking were quite extreme, and but he did it anyway because he could not stop himself. That was his outlet. It was a way of dealing with his trauma and escaping from, what he was facing mentally, psychologically. I think at that time, there was not such a focus on mental health. There was not as much access to mental health help as there is today. Fortunately for us, over the last few years, there's been a tremendous turnaround in terms of people's willingness to talk about and deal with mental health issues. Yeah. Whereas if you put yourself back into the 90s, that was not necessarily the case.
Yeah, there was definitely a stigma back then on things like that.
100%. Yeah. So I think that was stage 2. Then stage 3 was when he got into the NBA. And this really kind of solidified that this is his lifestyle, right? And can you just picture as a rookie, you're on the Houston Rockets private jet. You've got Charles Barkley here, who by his own admission loves gambling.
Yeah.
It's Charles, it's, so many of the players around, gathered around on the private jet, laying down $10,000 bets, $20,000 bets. And the desire to fit in for the rookie was so compelling and so kind of overwhelming. I mean, of course he was going to join in. How could he not? Like, you want to be part of the in crowd.
The peer pressure.
You want to be accepted. The peer pressure.
Yeah.
That's like a microcosm of what other people feel. Maybe people who are in college today are in, a situation with a fraternity or a group of friends and everybody else is doing it. So they feel like they have to do it. And it was the same thing, except it was Charles Barkley. So, I think by that third stage, it had become his way of life.
Mm.
And, there was no turning back at that point.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't even imagine how stressful that must have been, and also the pressure of the status symbol and you wanting to stick by the team, but also you're playing for your family. You have a lot riding on it, and then to have the injuries, I can't even imagine the mental gymnastics that were going on, just sitting there healing and trying to get back out there. Completely relatable, and something that people can fall into, especially if they're not, working, or if they're not like actively participating and helping. They want to find other ways to help, and sometimes those avenues are dangerous, as depicted by Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which is something that you relate to in your novel, both the novel and the film. Yes. Hunter S. Thompson depiction of the harsh lessons to learn from gambling.
I love that movie, by the way.
Yeah,
and
me
I
too.
loved it
Me too.
Before I met Randy. I loved that movie. I felt it was
surreal.
It was so surreal.
Yeah.
It movies have the ability to transport us
Mm-hmm.
to experiences that we would not necessarily have in our own lives. And great movies do that at an incredibly compelling level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
This
absolutely.
I would put into that category. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, both the novel and the film, have this kind of transporting ability to enable, the viewer or the reader to really deeply experience what the characters are experiencing without having to take the drugs that the characters are taking.
Thankfully. 'Cause I don't want to take those drugs.
I do not either. Honestly, it was the best PSA for not taking drugs in that movie.
Yeah, thank you, Terry Gilliam, for making such a astounding film.
Indeed.
But Looney Tunes directly parodies the work in the title Hair and Loathing in Las Vegas. And in that, Yosemite Sam claims, and this is something we talked about a second ago, was Bugs' luck is derived from his lucky rabbit's feet. Now, how do lucky charms and rituals contribute to the illusion of control in gambling? And how could those items prevent the gambler from seeing the harsh truth around them? From your research.
Looky here, you cheaters. We got rules around here. There's no lucky medals. There ain't no four-leaf clovers, no horseshoes, no little rabbit's feet. I've been hornswoggled.
Yes. So, I mean, this is somewhat tied back to what we talked about earlier, being able to outsmart the system. It is simply an irrational belief that something you either have in the case of a charm or know in the case of outsmarting the system, something that you have or know, being able to bend reality or change probability or statistics, which are pretty consistent over time, if you break it down and actually look at the numbers. So I think that, this kind of belief in objects, which stems from, hundreds, perhaps thousands of years of talismans being used.
Superstition.
I think that, those were powerful at the time before we had access to a lot of data.
Sure.
Then when we were able to track and measure and understand better what's really happening, then I think they've become rather quaint, and unrealistic. So I don't have any, empirical evidence to back this up, but I suspect there's less or use of lucky charms to help people win in gambling. Maybe there isn't. I'd love to know from the listeners whether they're carrying any lucky charms. Or people perhaps do carry lucky charms but don't really believe they're bringing them luck.
Yeah, please let us know in the comments below in this interview, because I would love to know that as well. And if you ever go into a casino, do you always have like a lucky coin with you, or a lucky rabbit's foot? Let us know. I would really love to read that.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious about that too. Please tell us.
So you mentioned electronic gaming machines and race betting, sporting betting. Like it's everywhere. In Yosemite Sam and in Bugs Bunny Rides Again, Yosemite Sam showcases a clear example of high-risk gambling, betting his entire livelihood for a game of din rummy. And he loses, and he gets kicked out of town.
Tell you what we'll do. We'll make like the Western pictures and play cards. And the loser gets out of town.
You're on!
There's so many examples of the way, smaller gambling can lead to high-risk gambling. What are the traps of high-risk gambling that people can look out for in their daily lives, and something that they can tell apart from, oh, I'm getting too deep, I'm getting I'm going too far with this?
I'm going too far with this is a really, really interesting question, and there's been a lot of research done on this specific question. And every time a paper comes out, I love reading about it, because I just love what the academics are doing at the moment in kind of digging in to when is it too much? Obviously, what is too much for rookie Randy Livingston compared to what is too much for future Hall of Famer back then, Charles Barkley on the private jet, are going to be two totally different things.
Right.
So the imposition of something like what a universal number is really, really difficult. And regulators around the world have grappled with this question over, years and years and years. And the regulators approach it in different ways in different places. And even to the extent that they are still debating this question, there are different approaches. I'll give you two examples that I find really interesting.
Oh, yes, please.
One is a percentage of income. So if you make $50,000 a year, your limit would be, say, 10% of the income, say $5,000. If you make $500,000, then you could afford to lose maybe $50,000 as being 10% of your income. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that is one of the approaches that have been discussed. Another super interesting one is what they do in Norway. So in Norway, they actually do have a universal number.
Really?
Yes. As far as I'm aware, I think it is currently the only country that does that, or there might be one or two others, but Norway is kind of the most famous one that gets cited when talking about this question. They have a universal number that every single person in the country who bets, if they hit that number, they are blocked from continuing to gamble.
Wow. Like they're just kicked
Isn't
out
that
of the
fascinating?
casino, or like how does that how do they know who governs that?
Yeah, it's interesting because the operators are basically tied to the government very closely.
Okay.
So also think about it, it's got a lot smaller population. So I think it's manageable in their context of fewer operators and smaller population.
That makes sense.
So that is really fascinating. What we advocate, and you mentioned that I'm a responsible gaming ambassador. I actually do this work with FanDuel, which is the biggest sports betting company in North America. So
It's huge.
It's huge, and Randy and I are both responsible gaming ambassadors with FanDuel, because when we're thinking about like how do we take our message and touch more people and amplify what we're doing, we knew we couldn't do it alone. We knew we needed to partner with somebody who was interested in talking about responsible gaming and felt as passionately about it as we do. And we were so fortunate to engage with FanDuel and see that they had this commitment that came from the very top of the organization. And as a result of that, we have been able to learn a lot more about what happens and what the processes are within the operator environment, and come up with ideas and strategies and tools that can help everyday people gamble responsibly. So what does gamble responsibly mean? Basically, it comes back to your question. It's about how do you know when is too much. So responsible gaming is play with a budget. And when you hit your budget, stop. If I could distill it down to the core message, that is the message.
And definitely don't play with your livelihood or, living in the town.
No.
You have to move
No.
after you lose. Do not play.
Do not play. Do not play. That is a bridge too far.
Yeah.
I think, that if, I very much believe that, I've got a bit of a libertarian aspect to my personality. I do believe that, if people want, to experience different forms of entertainment, they're entitled to do that. You know, my form of entertainment that I love going out to movies and seeing shows and seeing performers, musicians perform. If somebody else sees a great night out being going to the casino and spending a few $100s or $1,000 and that is their budget, and they have fun and they stop when they spend the $1,000, then okay, who am I to judge which is the better form of entertainment? You know, I'm not sitting here, you know, saying one is better than the other. I know I spent a ridiculously large amount of money buying Taylor Swift tickets for myself and my daughter. So, you know, I'm not going to point fingers at anybody else spending money for entertainment. So I think that being self-aware enough to set limits and to use the tools that are available. So FanDuel does this, but to be honest, all of the large operators do this. They have tools embedded into their apps that you can use, that everybody can use and everybody ought to use when you play. So you can go in there, you can see your spend, you can set either time or spend or loss limits. And then when you hit that limit, it will notify you. So, you know, you can take certain action. So utilizing the tools, I think, is absolutely key and super important. It's so important. And the message that we want to get across is these tools are not just tools for people who have a gambling problem. These are tools that should be so normal and natural to use that it's akin to sitting to a car, closing the door and putting on your seatbelt.
Absolutely.
Like we
that.
do that without thinking. We don't think twice about putting on the seatbelt when we get into the car. Is it because we think we're crazy drivers? No. It's because that is the acceptable method of reducing risk while driving.
Mm-hmm.
So
and if you have seatbelt aversion, do not get into a car.
Exactly. So, you know, if you do choose to gamble and that's your form of entertainment, then use the tools that are being offered to you. And, you know, that's the main point. I think it's hard, perhaps, for some people to understand what their limit is. And if that is the case, you know, there are people available who you can talk to. There might be financial counselors or responsible gaming representatives. You know, it really varies from place to place, or whether you're in a physical casino environment or playing online, you know, and maybe people don't even know that these people exist or are unaware of these resources. But if you are in a casino or sports betting through apps, certainly through the licensed operators, which is why it's so important, if you do choose to bet, to do it through licensed operators, because the offshore or illegal or black market operators obviously don't have to adhere to the same player protection standards as the licensed operators.
Makes sense.
But all of these operators have people available who you can talk to discuss your situation, to ask questions about this, and to help you to set limits. So use the resources available. Perhaps be conservative if you're setting your own limit, and do that to start with and see how it goes.
Yes, please do. I love that idea, and that analogy makes perfect sense. My last question goes into another short that is known for its, a play on colloquialism of the gambling bug, the idea that gambling can derive from an outside force, maybe old-fashioned, or just this colloquialism, but it made for a really funny comedic concept in early Tibet, the 1951 short.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the gambling bug in his native habitat. Hey, stand up. Let's get a look at you. That's it. There he is, folks, the gambling bug. His bite causes gambling fever.
You wrote in your research that younger males are the group most at risk of developing a gambling problem. Do you think factors like gaming has led to these patterns showing up in this demographic? And at the beginning of that short, it's just men that have gotten bit by the gambling bug and like they're, tossing cards, rolling dice.
Now we'll see a few examples of his work. What do you say, Luigi? Double or nothing?
Please, senor, no more toss the coin, just pay the check.
I'll bet you $5 that fly lands on my glass first.
It's a bet.
So remember, folks, the gambling bug will get you if you don't watch out.
You know, what the research tells us, the most recent research, is there is a massive upswing in young males gambling. In addition to that, the two other demographics that have seen an uptick are middle-aged women and older people.
Okay.
Nowhere near as dramatically increased as the young males. The kind of 17 to 25-year-old males is where the biggest spike has happened. There is still ongoing research trying to understand the reason why those demographics are, have spiked so dramatically. I think my personal opinion is there's a combination of factors. One of the things that I'm seeing with older people, for example, is the prevalence of online gaming has increased so much. So whereas in the past it might have been difficult to access a physical casino, they can stay where they are and use their phone. Yeah, it comes to them. So I'm speculating that might be part of what's driving the older generation increase. As far as the women side of things, women are gambling more, but the rate of increase is less than men. But the young men is, honestly, as the mother of both a daughter and a son, I am much more worried about my son getting into gambling, or being exposed to gambling among his peer group. It is so pervasive right now. If you have a teenage boy, the likelihood of them not having gambled is very small.
Wow.
Yeah. There has been some recent research that suggests that in a survey, over a third of teens surveyed admitted to gambling in the last year prior to the survey. But in my mind, I'm thinking, that's how many admitted to it. Like, imagine how many didn't admit to it.
Right. Or they don't even know. Like an example being the loot boxes that you can unlock, and like those little like in-game gambles that they do, like just hitting a button and you having a chance to win something. That is gambling. That is taking a chance with something you've earned on something you may not have. And it's definitely prevalent, more so now than ever before. And that is why I have loved reading your book. And I want people to know about it. So, Anita, can you tell people when and where people can find your book?
Absolutely. It's actually out now. It's available through Amazon. You can go onto Amazon. Anita Smith Assist are the three keywords that you need to find it, and that will get delivered to you in a few days.
Wonderful.
I am currently working on the audio book recording, so people who prefer to listen rather than read, that will be available in June 2026, which I guess is when this is coming out.
Yeah, this will be right around the corner from that. So, and where can people find you online if they want to ask you questions?
Absolutely. I really welcome questions. The two platforms that I'm most active on are LinkedIn and Instagram. So if you work in the area of gambling or gambling harm prevention, LinkedIn is a great place. There's a very active community sharing knowledge and information and research on LinkedIn in terms of, where I'm at, conferences I'm speaking at, and that kind of thing. I will post that on Instagram, and I'm happy to answer questions on either of those two platforms. I really welcome people's questions and also hearing about people's experience. I want to know if you are somebody that has been through this and got out the other side, or maybe have some different experiences to share. One of the things that I want people to know about the book is I am not giving a prescription for how to get better. This is more like a menu of items that you can try, and everybody's going to be different. There's not one way to get through a gambling addiction, but through my book, I've given you so many different ideas, scripts, methods, tools. Try this one, try that one, try the one that resonates with you most. And then, keep going until you get to the end. I should mention, because you did ask me earlier about whether any, third person became involved in Randy's recovery.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't get anybody else involved during the whole process of getting to understand that Randy was gambling. However, when he finally got to the point of saying, yes, I want help, I need help, I'm ready to get professional help, at that point, he then did enter a rehab facility, a 30-day inpatient rehab facility.
Okay, great.
So I was not the person who waved a magic wand and quote unquote fixed him, because I do not believe that I'm capable of doing that. However, I did walk the journey with him, and I like referring to people in my shoes as supporters, because we are the ones who can put our hand out and hold the hand of the person going through this and walk the journey with them. And in his case, coming out of rehab, he has never looked back. That
That's
was
great.
a life-defining moment that has been the most positive, incredible turnaround that I could ever imagine. And he's just gone from strength to strength since then. He does advocacy work for raising awareness about gambling harm prevention. And together we love telling our story, our family's story, in the hope that we can destigmatize these conversations and have more people talking about them in an open, frank, and compassionate way.
Well, congratulations to Randy on his journey, and congratulations to you, Anita, on this book. I hope it's a success. Thank you for the assist on this podcast and this linear conversation.
I have loved this conversation. Thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me.
It is my pleasure. It is my pleasure. And if you're listening to this, you can follow us over on Instagram at This Means Podcast, or anywhere you download your podcasts. You can subscribe to us over there and on YouTube.
And as always, that ain't all, folks.